My name is Paige Byer. I'm with Habitat for Humanity Metro Maryland, and Alpheus Fair is also joining us. And behind the scenes, we also have our great, wonderful Habitat staff, Lisette, Oriana, and Sandra Limjuko. So we want to welcome everybody this morning and thank you for joining us for our Skill Builder Workshop. This is our first Women Build Skill Builder Workshop for Women Build 2020, and we hope that you'll learn some great tips to help you spruce up your space while you're safe at home during these unprecedented times. This is temporary, and just remember, we will build and be back in person soon. And until then, we think that you'll enjoy what we have to share today. Just want to do a quick plug. Women Build first started in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, with Habitat in 1991, and in 2010, Habitat for Humanity Metro Maryland had our first Women Build Day. We then took a hiatus until 2016, and now we are celebrating our 5th year back. Every year, outdoing ourselves, and we expect the same for Women Build 2020. Women Build is about bringing empowered women together to learn new skills, to raise awareness, to raise funds, and literally help us raise the walls for safe and affordable homes for low-income families in our local communities. Truth is, female heads of households are often hard-pressed and more challenged to secure safe, affordable homes and make up more than 60% of Habitat homeowners in the U.S. You, empowered women and a few men, are awesome. You're helping us to provide critical, safe housing for those most vulnerable. We are currently at $166,683 as of this morning, yay. And our goal is to raise $250,000 this season and to have 50 teams of 10 women bringing more than 400 women out to build homes with us once it's safe and we're beyond stay-at-home measures. So with Women Build Days extended through October, there's still time to participate and get involved for any of you that are listening out there and interested. And today we are here to learn some new skills. So, and also have some fun. Our Skill Builder Workshop is on painting like a professional, and Alpheus has some great tips and tricks to help you do just that. And oh, what a difference a coat of paint does make. So I'd like to introduce Habitat's very own Alpheus Fair. He's our construction supervisor to lead us through the process. We're going to watch a video, and after the video, Alfie's going to be available to answer all of your questions. And you can post throughout the video and also wait till the end. But Alfie has extensive experience in construction and remodeling. He's a union-trained carpenter and has over 45 years experience. We are fortunate enough to have had Alfie join us, our Habitat team, this past year, and he's been helping low-income families keep their homes safe and healthy ever since. So without further ado, Alpheus, take it away.
Okay. Well, I'm assuming we're going to go right to the video, and I'm going to be around to answer any kind of questions you might have afterwards. So Lisette, whenever you're ready, we can start the show.
Hi, and welcome to this skill building workshop in support of Habitat for Humanity Metro Maryland's Women Build 2020 effort. My name is Alpheus Fair, and I am the construction supervisor for our repair and weatherization programs. We're here to celebrate and honor women in the local community as we work to make a difference in the lives of our neighbors. Habitat for Humanity Metro Maryland builds strength, stability, and self-reliance through affordable housing. Since our founding in 1982, we've built 60 new homes, remodeled 35 vacant and distressed homes, and completed over 400 repair and weatherization projects. In all, we've been able to assist over 1,000 people in their pursuit of decent and affordable housing. So we're really excited about this year's 2020 Women Build and the 46 and counting teams who will be coming out to our build sites through this coming October. Today we're going to cover a few basics of painting, and what better way than to actually paint a wall. So first step is we're going to go ahead and take a look at this wall back here and do a brief assessment of necessary things to do to get it prepared, ready for paint. So here we go. There's a here's a close-up of the work area. You know, this is a nice nice little project. We have some baseboard at the bottom that we need to work around. There's an outlet that we have to work around, and see an area there that looks like a patch that will need to be primed. And you know, for the most part, we're in pretty good shape here. Looks like maybe I see a nail underneath here that we'll have to set, and you know, just a slight. We see that where there's a few spots where the drywall paper has been torn off, so we'll have to maybe prime those areas when we prime the patch area up above here. And then we should be ready to get going. So as you can see, we've taken the time to mask our work. I've placed some blue tape along the bottom there. And you'll notice that I've allowed it to create a little, rather than pushing the tape tight against the molding, I've allowed it to project out a little bit to create like a little canopy so that the spray that's created when we do our rolling will not spray onto the woodwork. Also, I've put a little piece of tape over. I took the electrical plate off. That's my preference. Some folks just leave them on and cut around them. I find it more efficient to take the plates off and place some tape over the outlet portion itself, so that we don't, again, spray all over things that we don't intend to paint. This also gives us an opportunity to clean up those switch plates and outlet plates. I have primed the area that was patched. It's still bleeding through a little bit, but it should take the finish coat without needing a second coat. It's still a little bit damp. I also sanded some of the high spots on our wood trim and spot primed those areas so they're ready to go. And I've set that nail. And so those spots are still showing up dark, but they are spot primed. And when it comes time to put our finish coat on, those areas will paint in nicely. Now you notice that I didn't take the time to mask the all of the woodwork. I you know, I don't consider myself a professional painter, but I feel like I've accomplished a skill level that I can you know, cut in successfully in these areas along the woodwork, so that I don't have the need for you know, tape in those areas. So that saves a little bit of time. You know, when we're cutting in that carry here, we'll just do our cutting in carefully, and no need to use tape on those areas. Okay, so let's go ahead and get some paint on the walls. Hey gang, it's been about a half hour here, and so let's go ahead and check in on our progress. As you can see, we've got our paint area cut in, and we've painted areas where our roller won't fit. We've we've cut in around our window, and down below were cut in around our outlet and all the wood trim. We're going to stop right there because eventually there'll be there's going to be a bookshelf at that end of the wall, so we don't need to go any further. So I'm ready to go ahead and get some paint on the walls with our roller. I did want to point out a few things that I had failed to mention previously. I wanted to point out that you see these drop cloths are actually just an added layer of protection. I have used some paper with a sticky edge on one side that allows you to run something like tape, but at a much wider swath along the edge of the wall. This stays fixed like tape, and so it doesn't. We don't have to worry so much about our drop cloth getting pushed away and exposing the floor with that extra layer. Notice also that I don't have any single-use plastic in use here. This is all canvas drop cloths and a recycled sheet and paper that we're using to mask here. Trying our best to be mindful of the wastes involved in a painting process. So nice thing about these drop cloths is that you can use them over and over again. Hello, we're back, and I'm going to try to get a few action shots here of actually getting the paint on the walls with a roller. So I'll do a couple of swipes here and explain the process as I go. Hopefully this will be helpful to some folks who are new to the process. Can't see my hand, but I'm carefully adding a little more paint to my roller. And we like to work from the top down. Just gentle but firm and consistent pressure on the roller. These roller extensions are nice because they kind of keep you away from that spray I was talking about earlier. It has a universal thread so that you can thread it into the bottom of just about any standard roller, and it allows you to get a little bit away from the work. And of course this particular one has a extension so you can get to hard to reach areas. And yeah, just work your way down the wall. So here we go, gang. We've got our wall painted. As you can see, it's nicely cut in all the way around the woodwork, and yeah, it's nice color, brightens the space up nicely. We're happy with it. So now I'd like to cover what I find to be one of the more overlooked aspects of painting, and that is just like cleaning up after mealtime. It's straightening things up and getting ready for the next project. And a few helpful techniques. We've got our pan here that I used to roll in for my roller. You always want to keep a brush handy when you're transferring paints from one container to the other, so you can do it as neatly and thoroughly as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and get this paint back in the original can. Try to get that, as much of that material as we can. Paint is a valuable commodity. It can get really expensive, so you want to be thorough in transferring this material, utilizing as much of it as you can. Okay, and we've got that all in the original container. Great. And while I'm here cleaning this out, I can show you one of the basic techniques of getting paint from the brush, or rather from the can to the wall. Something I didn't cover earlier, but when you dip your paintbrush into a can of paint, see how I scrape it on the side to get one side clear to paint? You only need about 3/8 to a 1/2 inch of paint on the brush itself. Scrape one side so you have an opportunity to get to your wall before you get your drips. Now, so I've got a roller here that's still saturated with paint. I want to try to salvage as much of that as I can. This is a what is called a 5-in-1 tool. It's a really handy tool to have around. You can use it as a putty knife, but it also has this little area here that's in the shape of a roller. You can use that tool to scrape the excess paint off of your roller. And see, if I were scraping this into a 1-cup container, I would probably get close to a cup of paint. That I can put back into our original can and save for the next project. Now, let's get the lid back on our paint can. I have a rubber mallet here that I'm going to use to put a lid on the can. It's always good to drape a rag over your can before you tap on the lid. Keep it from splattering. There we go. We can set that aside, ready for the next project. Now for cleaning, first of all, this is just a bucket of water because we're using latex paints. We can put both our brush and our roller into this bucket of water. And then I'm going to bring out one of my favorite tools for this task. This is called a brush and roller spinner. Let's see, you can find them at most paint stores. So we want to go ahead and there's a spring-loaded device at the end that allows you to slip that brush onto the end of this brush spinner, and you can just spin that brush to clean it up. It does a pretty good job. If you see a little more paint in there, it's nice to have I have a plastic brush that I use and set it on the edge of the bucket and go ahead and comb out some of the more stubborn paint on your brush. Get all the way up to the furrow there. And then go ahead and do one last spin. Now, if the brush is sat around for a little bit, you might find it more difficult. You can always use warm water and a little bit of soap, and most of the paint will go out. And what I do with my brushes always is I try to get them back into the original packaging. In the case of this brush, or I fashion my own out of some paper and wrap the brush so that when it dries out, the bristles are all nice and straight. So we'll do that with the brush. And no reason why you can't reuse a good brush. You spend a little extra on your brushes, and you know, they should last you for years if you take good care of them. Now for the roller, we take that same 5-in-1 and scrape out the paint again in the water. And typically this is a little more work to get all the paint out of a roller. Sometimes, well, what works best is to have to do this over a slop sink if you have it. But for today's purposes, I just want to give you a quick example of how to get started on reusing your rollers and your brushes. In this case, it will slide right over this, and then you can spin that. Now, I've got a little bit too much water in my bucket to be able to submerge this all the way down into the bucket. So if I spin it, it's going to spray everywhere. So preferably this would be done outdoors, or you could get yourself another bucket that doesn't have water in it. Here I have another bucket that's empty. I can get my roller all the way down. And that spinning action gets out most of your paint. At that point, you can take it to a slop sink and rinse it with fresh water and spin. Usually after 2 or 3 sessions of rinsing and spinning, your roller is good as new, and you can take it on to your next project. Just take the original sleeve that it came in, slide it over, and store it for the next time. So that concludes today's painting. Hopefully that was some help to you all, and be safe out there, do good work, and keep in touch. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Alfie.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to meet up now for some questions. We do have a couple, so let's get started. We hope that everyone enjoyed the video and learned some new skills today. And let's see what our question is. What kind of brushes do you recommend? What are the price ranges and other tips?
Well, I like I always look for American made when I buy certain things, and brushes are one of them. There are two particular brands that I try to stay with. The one is Worcester and the other is Purdy. They typically have a wooden handle, and they come in an array of sizes. And in general, you know, the wider the surface, like if you're painting outdoors, you might want, you know, a big brush that covers a lot of area, because if you're doing like stain work or something like that, you would probably want a little bit bigger brush. But for most interior work, you're going to stay with whatever's comfortable for you. But typically I use like the brush I used in this video was a 2.5-inch brush with a tapered edge. And you know, the options are tapered and straight. And for cutting in, it's really nice to have, I don't know if I can describe in words the technique for using a tapered brush, but if you imagine, you know, when the brush is tapered, it gives you a long point. And so it's easier to get into the corners when it's tapered. And then as far as, you know, price range and where to get them, I mean, you know, your big building supply stores, typical big supply stores will have a range of brushes. And the price range is for these better quality brushes, they're almost twice as expensive as the cheaper imported versions. But we're talking about a difference between $6 and $12. So in my mind, it's always better to spend that little bit of extra money up front, and then you have a brush that you can use for years if you take care of it. And the one other thing about brushes is that there are, you know, all the brushes I used were for latex paints. They're labeled for all paints. If you're doing something where you're working with oils, alkali paints, and stains that are oil based, then you probably would want to go to a natural bristle brush. You just have to be careful that when you clean up a natural bristle brush, they're more expensive, but they're really nice brushes. And when you clean those, you don't want to get them near water, because the natural bristles will do what they call explode. They expand and they'll never go back to their normal their shape. And so whatever solvent is recommended for the medium that you're working in, that's the same solvent that you would want to clean your brush up with.
Thank you. For any type of project, or does it depend on the project? Does a single coat usually end up being enough?
Yeah, there's a lot of variables involved in that, and almost always you have to take it at a project by project basis. Typically, if a wall has been painted many times over the years and you're not going, if you're not covering a dark paint with a light paint, usually you can get away with just one coat. It is important to consider, I mean, if you have to do any kind of patching, if there are damaged areas where you have to repair, if there's any kind of patching involved around blemishes that have happened over the years, or any kind of caulking, then it's important that you spot prime those areas, because if it's fresh caulk or spackle, you really cannot expect the finished coat to cover that. It'll do what's called flashing, because that'll be the first time that material's been painted. So those are the areas that you would want to prime first before you put your finished coat on.
Thank you. I put the screen back on just to have all the materials you used visible, to kind of help questions as well. Another question we got was, when cleaning, do you allow the roller and brush to dry prior to placing in the original packaging?
That's not important. You can put them right back in the. In fact, it's preferable with the brushes to wrap them or put them back in their original packaging while they're still damp. And allow it to dry in the shape that it originally came in. Those original packages kind of hold it together, and just take care to comb through the brush and make sure all your the bristles in the brush are straight, and then you can wrap and close it in while it's damp, so it holds that shape. With the roller, you know, I don't think it would matter one way or the other if it was a dry or wet when slipping it back in the plastic sleeve. And also with the roller, you know, it's oftentimes it's not worth it to salvage a roller, you know, especially if you've gotten all day with a roller, because sometimes they're more difficult to clean. And that example of how to clean up a roller really was an example of how if you have a project that's going to extend over a couple of days, that you can reuse the same sleeve the whole time and just keep it in a plastic to keep, you know, to have it fresh for the next day, or maybe over lunch or something like that. But if you manage to paint a couple rooms with a roller, it's pretty, you know, you're probably ready for a new one. It's just that, you know, I encourage folks to try to reuse them from project to project, but once a project is done, the roller itself is, you know, you've gotten your money's worth out of it.
Great, thank you. We have a few more questions. Are there any special techniques you use when patching areas prior to painting?
Yeah, you know, on a professional project, you know, the patching materials tend to be really fast drying, and so, you know, I've adapted those over the years. I don't know that, you know, I guess in general, one recommendation I would make is to try to start with, when you're patching walls, I have a couple products that come in powder form that I can mix, because what happens is a lot of times you buy these smaller containers of like spackles, and, you know, there's a whole array of them, and they're pre-mixed, and you need like a thimbleful, and you use it, you put the lid on as best you can, and then, you know, 6 months later you go back to it and it's all dried out. So I would just recommend trying to use powdered patching materials that come in a powdered form, and that way you can mix as much as you need, and it won't be so wasteful. And there are powdered forms of joint compound that come in like 10 and 20 and 90, which indicates how quickly in minutes it will dry. And I usually keep around a bag of what's called 20. It dries in 20 minutes, and I'll mix that with water as necessary to do my patching.
Okay. We have one last question that kind of ties into that. Can you share what tips or changes you would do in prepping and preparing to paint plaster versus drywall?
Well, there's really very little difference. I mean, if drywall has never been painted and plaster has never been painted, you know, you're going to have to prime it and at first and then paint it. But really, once something is painted, what's underneath the original material, especially between drywall and plaster, is minimal, because what you're doing is you're painting over paint. You know, once a material gets well primed and painted once, it has less. There's less of a concern about what you're actually painting. The one thing about plaster is if it is brand new plaster. If it's just been applied to the walls, you have to be careful about allowing that to age, because it has a high alkaline content, and the materials in the plaster will actually blister paint if you paint too soon. So that's something you'd have to be concerned with plaster if it's brand new.
What if it's old?
If it's old, it's really, then it's probably been painted, and it's just a typical paint job.
Okay. We just got one more question. Do you only recommend spot prime, or what about paint and primer products?
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical about paints that say that primer's already in there. I don't really know what they mean by that. That's something I know has become very popular. I suspect it's some sort of marketing thing. Maybe there's a little more pigment in it. I'm not sure what allows them to say that it's a primer and a paint. But if there's any doubts, I'd say, go ahead and prime the whole wall. It makes a much richer, deeper, it builds the material up a little more and gives you a chance to, have the more you paint, the smoother it gets. So the more voids you fill in. Hopefully that answered all the question, but, and also paints dry so quickly. What I typically do is I spot prime, and then, once I paint the whole thing, oftentimes you look back and you see a couple of places that maybe you missed, or maybe the whole thing does need a second coat. And once you're set up and everything's masked, it's really easy just to hit it again. And actually, I ended up painting this wall behind me a second time, because my inspector came through and said she could see some spots. So oftentimes it's necessary to hit it again to make it look, bring it up to a quality project.
Great, thank you. Another question.
Mm-hmm.
What finishes do you recommend? Flat, eggshell, semi-gloss, etc., and for what areas?
Yeah, well, classically, you would do your higher glosses in like kitchens and bathrooms, because those are areas where you're going to want to wipe down the walls more frequently, and those surfaces, because of the finish, they're less porous, and so they're easier to wipe down and clean. In some respects, I think it's a function of taste. The higher gloss paints are a little harder to work with. They're harder to keep from streaking. And I find that what is really popular is the eggshell finish, because that is kind of a balance between flat and high gloss, and it has some of the qualities of a flat paint, but also is a little more durable in terms of being able to wash.
Great, thank you so much, Alfie. I think those are all the questions we have today. But if you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to our team. We'll be happy to answer. We will be posting this video on our website and sharing through email in case you missed anything or you want to review something again. Thank you again, Alfie, for recording things. I personally learned a lot myself.
Mm-hmm.
Look forward to our next workshop. We would love to see pictures of any projects that you guys are doing. Feel free to tag us on our Facebook. We'll be happy to share just to see what everyone's doing while they're safe at home. But that's it for today, everyone. Thank you again for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Bye, everyone.